that says, this is how I spent the money that you gave me. This is how much I received, and this is what I spent it on. And that gets all put together, it's required to be done, and then it gets audited to make sure that all the money that is supposed to be spent on transportation is actually spent on transportation. If he doesn't do it, he doesn't get paid. So that's another safeguard that you need to understand about. Commissioner's point with regard to the federal money. We also receive about $1 billion a year in federal money. That money, most of it winds its way through SEMCOG and then goes back out to the various agencies for expenditure. That money comes in on an 80-20 match. It has to be matched with 20%. So if we've got a project that's a $1 million project, you know, 800,000 of that can come from the feds, but the local units of government or the road agencies have to come up with $200,000. It's a great deal as long as you have $200,000 to match the money. The state of Michigan got into a situation back a few years ago where there wasn't enough local money to match all the money that the state of Michigan could have gone after from a federal point of view. And in order to do that, the legislature had to provide some additional funding, as has been talked about, out of general fund. What did that do? Well, it postponed a lot of work, and you do this 2 or 3 or 4 years, and after a while, the backlog of work that you have starts looking at your priorities, and you start thinking, well, you know, maybe I'm not going to get this project done. M59 is one of those projects that fell into that situation as a result of not having enough money to match all that federal aid that was coming in.
Right, so we're leaving money on the table because we can't come up with the 1-to-4 match.
Particularly on the road side for sure, and it's the same way on the transit side where there's a lot of other transit dollars that we could be made available to us from a federal point of view that we don't have additional funding in order to match. It's again, other states are using that federal money. That's our money. We talked about how that 18.4 cents that we pay for goes to Washington, and it's only been recently that that's all coming back to us. Well, even though we're getting 100% back, there are still states that are getting $1.20, $1.50, $2, $3 back because other states aren't ready to spend that money, and that's one of them. We're one of them.
Next question.
Come on, there were other hands up.
This question is probably more for Bill or Carmine, mainly because my guess is that you've had more interaction with the state legislature over the years on all these subjects. And that's not to say that Mike Crane hasn't also had plenty of contact with the legislature on this, but let's just assume for a moment in my corner of the county in Brighton that hypothetically speaking, maybe there's a skeptical community leader who has said to me recently, you know, Dana, I know you're saying that this proposal looks really good for our city because of the increased Act 51 money alone that Mike Crane's presentation recently has shown us and all the other projections, which are numbers that make me as a city manager go goo goo gaga. That's a technical city management phrase, by the way. But let's just say that skeptical community leader was saying to me, you know, I see those numbers, but what I'm concerned about, and it goes back to this several moving parts part of the proposal, is saying, you know, I'm just not sure. It just doesn't seem clean enough. You know, if it was a simple vote up or down on the gas tax, to increase road funding, you know, I can maybe go along with it, Dana. And then the other thing I'm concerned about, Dana, and again, this is all hypothetically speaking, mind you, maybe that same skeptical person is saying, community leader, you know, even if it passes, Dana, even though those numbers look great for our city, what's the legislature going to do to us in some other area that we might experience some kind of losses later? Now, folks, when I say that, truly I'm not meaning to be negative about this, but that I'm relating, you know, a situation that, a conversation, and yeah, I'm using the hypothetical word, but it could be anybody that could be raising that. So, and I know it calls for speculation, Bill or Carmine or Mike, on your part too. But what would you recommend to me to say to that hypothetical community leader in Brighton?
You want to start it?
I'll start it.
Okay, boss.
That's actually a good question. That's actually come out quite a bit. I'll paraphrase your question. Carmen, what's plan B if this doesn't work? I think is what you're saying.
Yes.
Well, here's how I would answer your question. I've been going to the legislature for 17 years, asking for money. They still haven't taken action. You'll notice they still haven't taken action. They punted this decision to you, the people. They still haven't taken action. So it's up to everybody to make up their own minds as far as I'm concerned. I will tell you this. There is no plan B. It's being discussed in the public in a meeting that I can attend in Lansing. So what I would tell you right now, it's this or bust in terms of additional money for transportation. Would they come up with something? Possibly. They haven't in the last 17 years. But is it within the realm of possibility? Sure it is. And if they do, what would it be? A lot of legislators have signed pieces of paper that says, I'm not going to raise taxes ever. And so we talked about the sales tax and moving that, and so what would they do? I'm just purely speculating, but I'm telling you, there's 17 years of history that says they haven't acted yet. That's what I'm put on the table for you to consider.
The other issue is there is a tendency in the state that when there's a problem and they have to cut things, they have a tendency to cut things that they don't actually operate.
Really?
Yeah, and I document that in a report called Running on Empty, which is kind of funny because the title applies to both scenarios. And as an example, there were some bills introduced a few days ago that, again, the state was saying, well, gee whiz, let's fund transportation by cutting revenues to local governments, whether it be schools or revenue sharing to local units of government, and had very little impact on state operations. So that's their idea of taking care of the issue, is to have the problem roll downhill. Now, that was one thing that was put together. Obviously, one of the problems is there are many different ways the legislature can go. That creates the problem. The legislature votes yes and no. It isn't a multiple choice test, except for when they put it on a constitutional amendment. Then it really becomes multiple choice. But when you have multiple choices, it's tough to get 56 and 20. 56 votes in the House, 20 votes in the Senate, and a governor to sign it, because everybody thinks that their idea is better. So you get lots of plans. They have 30 votes in the House and 12 votes in the Senate, and then somebody else has another 30 people that want to go in a different way, and in the end they say, well, this is just too complicated. And that's what we experienced last winter, was everybody was going in a different direction, had a different idea, and nothing got done.
Hey, Allison, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one more thing for Dana's local hypothetical community leader. Strictly hypothetical. And it isn't as nuanced as these policy guys are. It's, your streets are falling apart right now, right in front of you. You have watched this deterioration. These are the roads you go to work on. You send your kids out when they're 16 to drive on. You damn well better want to fix them. Whether this is the best vehicle to do it or not, the voters will decide in May, but we damn well better fix them or we're sunk. That's my pitch.
I know we're past the 10-minute limit, but Wes and Dan have both had their hands up for a bit, so if you guys don't mind, we'll do 2 more questions and then we'll break into our breakout groups. So go ahead.
Mine is more of a comment. There is a bill that was introduced into the House that would fix the roads without raising taxes. If I remember right, it has 18 co-sponsors. So to say that there is no Plan B, that if we don't get Proposal 1, it's Proposal 1 or bust, I think is misstating to the people here what's really going on in Lansing. Thank you very much.
That was the piece of legislation I was discussing that was just introduced a couple days ago. It has an interesting clause in it. It says that if anybody challenges this because it's unconstitutional, that it will go to a different way and immediately cut revenues substantially. That doesn't show up in legislation very often. What it basically means is they know what they're trying to do has a severe constitutional question associated to it, and that's the fact of levying part of a tax. There's a uniformity clause issue, and it's interesting, it's actually contained in the legislation. It's called a poison pill. It says if anybody challenges this, even though we know it's probably unconstitutional, that we'll just make it constitutional and cut everybody. I've worked tax policy in Lansing for 20 years. I think it's really critical that you don't start passing legislation that you know up front that you have to put in a clause that says, if the court says it's unconstitutional, we'll go a different way and make it worse on you.
Would that bill also affect local revenue sharing?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so the last question, if you take the mic over. Thanks.
If we're getting a 400% return on the monies that the federal government would match, why are we taking $280 million and giving it in that tax credit, where it sounds like if we didn't give that back, we could get $700, $800 million in matching funds, or am I missing that completely?
There's only a limited amount of federal money that we're allocated by formula. And so this proposal, with the additional revenue that it would generate, would allow us to match all of the federal money that we have available, that we currently have a difficult time matching. I would love to be able to tell you that we could get a lot more federal money. That would help us a lot. But at this point, we have the same situation in the federal government where they're not willing to raise any additional money either.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. At this time, we'd like to break into 2 groups to discuss road conditions and tax policy. If you have questions regarding road conditions, please find or move your chair to the nearest screen on the left side of the room. And if you have questions regarding tax policy, find or move your chair over to the right side of the room.
Or just move.
Or just roll.
And so we'll come back together at 8 o'clock. So you have a half an hour to pummel these guys in person. Have at it.